I'm Leia Masters, and I'm here to report about the uses and gratifications theory by L.U. Katz. So, instead of asking, what do media do to people, L.U. Katz flipped the question and then asked, what do people do to media? So, we live in a media-saturated world, and that means we are bombarded by a lot of media messages every day. But even if we are exposed to the same media, that doesn't mean that we will have the same effect, or we will be affected similarly. So a lot of media messages are given to us every day because everyone has different needs, and those needs need to be gratified. So for the media makers, or the media message makers, for them to be able to make sure that we will be able to grasp those messages, they create a lot of messages every day. And so it becomes hard to filter out, or to filter what information should be accepted and what information should be taken away. So to better understand the many underlying information about the uses and gratifications theory, let's take a closer look to the 5 assumptions of uses and grats. So the first assumption of uses and gratifications theory is people use media for their own particular purposes. So scholars first thought that the audiences were passive targets. You know, in the hypodermic needle theory, it is a model which graphically explains that we are the passive audiences, and then these media messages are the magic bullet that are fired in our heads, and it would affect us. So that's a very linear theory. In uses and gratifications, it begs to disagree because assumption 1 tells us that people use media for their own purposes. So we choose the media exposures that we have. So for example, in uses and gratifications theory, audiences are anything but passive. So one good example of this is, for example, Joe likes to watch basketball games, and then Taylor would watch basketball games because of very different reasons. Joe would watch a basketball game because he is a fan of basketball, and Taylor would watch basketball games because she wants to have a quality time with Joe. So they both have different reasons of watching it, different motivations of watching it, because Joe would watch it because his motivation is excitement or enjoyment, and then Taylor's motivation is either passing the time or just, for social interaction. And that's the first assumption. People use media for their own particular purposes, and we choose that. The second assumption is people seek to gratify needs. So people have different needs that need to be gratified through media consumption, right? So they deliberately use media, presumably based on the gratifications they seek from those media. For example, it would be best explained if I use an example that is very relatable. For example, I watch Grey's Anatomy. I watch Grey's Anatomy because I like to learn medical terms, and it makes me feel like a surgeon. So if another person watches Grey's Anatomy, he or she might have a different reason of watching it, a different motivation of watching it. Maybe his reason is because he just wants to be entertained by the story. He wants to be moved by the touching story of Grey's Anatomy. So we both have different purpose or different needs to be satisfied. I want to feel like I'm a surgeon, and he just wants to, feel the sadness or the happiness of every story. So we expose ourselves to different media messages because we want to gratify certain needs. The third assumption is media compete for our attention. So as I first said a while ago, we are bombarded by a lot of media messages. Why? Because every person has a different needs, has a different need to be gratified. So with that, media or message makers make sure that there are enough messages to be exposed to the viewers. So then media compete for our attention. But again, uses and gratifications theory shows us that audiences are anything but passive. Because for example, even if there are a lot of advertisements about this new gadget, for example, iPhone 11, even if there are a lot of advertisements about iPhone 11, if I'm not interested into gadgets, those advertisements won't affect me, even if it's all over the media platforms. So I won't be affected. But if you show it to a tech savvy, then definitely he or she would buy it. He or she would be entertained by the media message you're showing because he's interested on the message he or she is being exposed to. For example, another example is on Netflix, there are a lot of films that are being offered for us to watch. But if a person, or if my friend, for example, Shannon, if he told me that I should watch this particular series, and then I watched it, and I didn't like the series, then it won't really be something that I would find spectacular, because we have different preferences. So for him, he finds it spectacular, but for me it's not. So again, these media messages, like these films offered to us, they would make sure that a certain group or a certain person would patronize this film. And then, so because I have a different need, there are other films out there that would gratify my need. That's it. The next assumption is that media affect different people differently. So in the previous assumptions, it is stated that media messages affect different people differently, and it's pretty obvious if you look closely. For example, I don't like to watch romantic films because it annoys me, because it makes me feel like I'm more of a realist. So romantic films for me are more of a whimsical stories that really don't happen in real life. So I don't watch it. I don't want to watch it. But if for example, this person, my aunt, she likes to watch romantic films because for her, it makes her feel wanted or loved. Or because she is single, that's why she finds this romantic excitement, or what her need is to satisfy her romantic excitement. And so she watches romantic films. And so if we both watch romantic films at the same time, it would have a different effect on her, and it would have a different effect on me. So even if we're both exposed to the same media message, it would affect us differently. And that is the assumption number 4. Media affect different people differently. We have different perceptions and different tolerance on things, and so if we are exposed to the same media messages, we would still have different reactions towards it. The last assumption is the assumption number 5. People can accurately report their media use and motivation. So this last assumption is the most debated and the most controversial one. Why? Because the measurement of knowing exactly the motivation of one person on why they use media is very questionable. Like, if you ask a person, why does he use cell phones, or why does he use or play Mobile Legends or scroll on his Facebook account every time there is a gathering, and he said that he just wants to pass the time, or he just wants to be entertained, but in reality he just wants to avoid socializing with people. So if that's the real reason, and then he said otherwise, would that be an accurate representation of his motivation? Of course not. So even if some scholars attempted to show that we can trust people's reports on how they use, on why they use media, it would be hard to measure how accurate it is. So does his answer passing the time would be accurate just because he said so? In essence, assumptions are sometimes not true. And in that case, it's really likely to be untrue. So the next topic under the uses of gratifications theory is understanding the typology of it. So the typology of uses and gratifications theory by Alan Rubin, he said that there are 8 motivations that can account on why people consume media. But this typology is not very accurate, but very common. If you understand this 8 typology, then you can understand, even if on your basic interactions with other people or basic consumption of media, you would understand that yes, these are true and these might happen every time, every day, to me or to you. So the first typology of uses and gratifications is the passing time. So this motivation is common when we are in situations where we are, waiting. For example, while waiting for the doctor's appointment, while you're outside, you're scrolling through your phone, etc. Or for example, you have a date and then you arrived early because you're so excited. And then when you arrive to that date early, so for you to feel less awkward, you'll scroll through your phone. The next typology of uses and gratifications is the companionship. This happens when groups of people gather together to, for example, to watch a volleyball game. If my friends come over here to watch a volleyball game and then we bond, that is somehow companionship because we use that media. Mommy! I'm recording. The second typology of uses and gratifications theory is the companionship. So this happens when groups of people gather. For example, if we watch a volleyball game. Hello. The next typology of uses and gratifications is the companionship. So this happens when, for example, a group of people come together to watch a volleyball game. So if my friends come over and then we watch a volleyball game over, over some drinks and nachos or whatever, we bond. But at the same time, we use the media. We are being exposed to media because of our bonding. So that is companionship. That's basically the definition of it. So the next typology is escape. Some use media as an escape from the reality or, as an escape from the pressure of the real world. So for example, as I was writing my thesis, for me to be able to have a break from all the stress, I would from time to time watch YouTube videos or scroll through my Facebook account or Twitter account, and then eventually I'd go back to the real life, which is, writing my thesis, which is really hard. The fourth typology of uses and gratifications is enjoyment. So this is the basic, most common typology of why we use media, because we want to enjoy. That's basically the definition. The fifth typology of uses and gratifications is the social interaction. So people use media for them to connect to the people they want to connect to, especially if they are bounded by time or space. So if there's a time or space difference. And if sometimes social interaction is also used, is also a motivation for people to use media, because sometimes they want to be in. So for example, my mom would watch Game of Thrones because she wants to relate to us whenever we're talking about it. So she'd watch Game of Thrones, and then after watching, she'd talk to us about it, so that she's in with the conversation. She knows what we're talking about. Who's Jon Snow, who's Daenerys, who's Arya, etc. The next typology of uses and gratifications is the relaxation. So it's very explanatory. After a very tiring day, after working for the whole day, some of us just, wants to be relaxed in some sort of way. So we use any media that we can to be relaxed. That's it. The next typology of uses and gratifications is information. So we use media. We expose ourselves to media because we want to be informed, like about the news and current affairs, or about the people we want to know. It's very easy to know someone online because everything is available online. It's very easy to gather information online. So that's it. And the last typology of uses and gratifications is excitement. Some media consumers are after an intense feeling of excitement. And so, as we can observe during primetime shows, almost everything, every story that is offered during primetime is either about cheating wives, issues with families, etc., killing, because some people want this kind of adrenaline. So they feel the excitement, and so they want to have this kind of excitement even by just, watching or consuming media. And then that's the 8 typology of uses and gratifications. So now let's go to parasocial relationships. This one is something that were debated a long time ago, if this should be included on the typology of uses and gratifications. But as of now, it's not yet included, but it is a topic that is highly relevant, especially now that we are in a technologically driven world. Yeah. Because parasocial relationships are one-sided relationships where one person extends emotional energy, interest, and time, and the other party is completely unaware of the existence of the other. So, for example, I can say that I have a parasocial relationship with Taylor Swift because I have an emotional attachment to her. And so everything that she says, or I believe everything she says or everything she endorses, I would buy. Or my parents would buy. Or my sisters would buy. And so, media makers or media message makers would actually ask for Taylor Swift to become their brand ambassadress, because it's true that they notice that there are parasocial relationships between Taylor Swift and other audiences. So they use this parasocial relationships because it is considered as one typology that makes people use media. For example, I would check my Twitter every time because Taylor would post something. Also, if, for example, you have other Hollywood idols or singers or whatnot, and then whatever he or she endorses or whatever he or she says, you'd believe. And so you'd check their Instagram accounts every day, you'd check their feed, you'd check their timelines, etc. And media platforms like Twitter, Tumblr, etc., are more likely to be used to connect and satisfy the parasocial relationships the audiences have. And that's it. So it is really debatable if this parasocial relationship should be included in the typology because it happens. It really happens. I am the living proof. So to end my report about uses and gratifications theory, I'd like to say that with all of these reasons and motivations on media consumption, it is still advisable for us to take the holistic approach by practicing mindfulness and moderation, because by doing this, we would know how to balance our media habits. And I believe that uses and gratifications theory is very helpful because we would know that as we go on through our everyday lives, even if we are faced with a lot of media messages, we would know what to do with it, and to understand that these are our motivations, and it will help us to control the media rather than the other way around. So we are the ones that should control media, and the media should not control us. That is what uses and gratifications are for. Uses and gratifications theory is here for. So with that, I'd like to thank you, and I hope you learned something. Thank you.